It's fascinating to think about how different home media releases were just a few decades ago. Nowadays, people can watch full shows or even movies through streaming platforms. But just a few decades ago, we were rocking these VHS tapes. While they may appear bulky and archaic today, these were the leading format media was released on from their inception in the late 70s, all the way until DVDs eclipsed them in popularity in the 2000s. Technology has far surpassed VHS, but there is still a lot to love about them. The tape shells came in a variety of fun colors, blank tapes are always interesting to find, unlicensed releases are highly fascinating and historical, and overall even official releases have this feeling of unpolishedness, one that's been cleaned up for modern releases. Along with just being interesting pieces from their time, it's also true that some VHS tapes have become high-tier collector's items. Now before you get too excited, no. Chances are your VHS tape of Bear in the Big Blue House is not worth anything, but there do exist some that are. And today we'll be taking a look at some of the most interesting cases of them, and VHS tapes as a whole. In this video, we'll be going over some of the wackiest and most interesting qualities of these tapes, as well as some of the most unique releases out there. And with all of that said, let's begin. Before we dive into the really interesting stuff, I'd like to highlight some of the weirdest but coolest VHS covers I've ever seen. Most tapes themselves look pretty samey, with the only thing that makes them stand out being their label and maybe their color. The real eye-catchers with these were always the covers. Back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the art used on these were custom made for these releases. Because of this, it was pretty common to see covers that weren't very accurate to the shows the tapes contained. A lot of them ended up looking pretty strange, as it wasn't that common to see covers made with pre-made assets. Nowadays, most home media companies use strict style guides with specific pieces of artwork they can use for their releases. Back then, it was much less restrictive. While most of these covers can be seen as just plain bad, they're definitely fun to look at. A great example of these are the tapes released for the Deke Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons. While some of them have artwork based off of the episodes included on the tapes, most of these use seemingly random art. Most of these are pieces not seen anywhere else, likely commissioned solely for these releases. Some do actually use stock art, some even use artwork from the games, but most are these strange, off-model, but charming designs. It's entirely possible that a lot of these were total rush jobs. Maybe the artists weren't paid enough or just didn't care, explaining how sloppy some of them look. But regardless, you'd never see stuff like this fly today. For some of the Mario releases, the covers were drawn on cells, just like the actual show. Some of these cells still even exist today. As these were drawn solely for covers, they're real art pieces. Most of these early VHS releases of TV shows only contained a handful of episodes each, which seems like nothing compared to the full season and series releases we see today, but back then, these were amazing. Many of these tapes were the first instance of these popular series being released on home media. The first time SpongeBob was pressed onto video was, well, technically with this Best of Nicktoons 1998 VHS. This was a promotional item that contains the pilot cut of Help Wanted. The first publicly released tapes of SpongeBob were these two, Nautical Nonsense and Sponge Buddies. These two were also available as one DVD, all released in 2001. Did you know that Family Guy saw a VHS release? It did, in the UK at least. Season 1 got a 2-tape twin set that was released in the early 2000s, seemingly only in the UK though, as they all tend to pop up over there. Yeah, you already know. On May 19, 2014, McDonald's officially introduced their new mascot to the United States, Happy. This Minion-inspired Red Happy Meal character had already appeared in international commercials, but it wasn't until then when it was introduced to Americans. People were confused and certainly not happy. It's a fine mascot, one suitable for the era of McDonald's it was made for, but one of the main reasons people were angered by its introduction was that it seemingly meant the end of Ronald McDonald and his friends. In 1963, Ronald McDonald was introduced and quickly became one of the most famous mascots of his time. To expand his success, in 1971, McDonald's launched the ever-popular McDonaldland branding, which brought with it countless commercials and other forms of promotion, starring not just Ronald, but an entire McGang. These characters were used in almost all of McDonald's marketing for decades, until slowly being phased out. The McDonaldland brand was almost entirely dropped by 2004, with characters besides Ronald almost never appearing beyond that. McDonald's has since used several different characters in their adverts, but none have reached the peak of popularity seen with the McDonaldland gang. These characters were iconic, and late into their run, they were used in a cartoon series that was released exclusively on VHS. The Wacky Adventures of Ronald McDonald was a 6-episode direct-to-VHS miniseries created by the acclaimed entertainment studio Klasky Csupo, more specifically their Kachoo division. Yep, the Rugrats guys made a McDonald's series and their style is all over it. Each episode of the show, being approximately 40 minutes in length, was released on its own tape, which were available to be purchased exclusively at McDonald's restaurants while supplies last, of course. Each tape was only $3.99, making for a sound purchase for families already getting meals for their kids. Having an additional 40 minutes of content to keep them busy when they got home was surely very convenient. Each video contained short live-action segments starring Ronald himself, but the bulk of the tapes were the cartoons. While Klasky Csupo already had huge projects under their belt and more on the way, these must have been a huge gig for them. McDonald's is so huge. Making a cartoon for them must have been crazy for the people working on it. The company redesigned the McDonaldland gang, in their signature sorta weird but still appealing style seen in their other work. Their redesigned Hamburglar is some class A character design. The first episode of the series, Scared Silly, was released on October 9th, 1998. After that, new episodes were released sporadically through 2001. 5 episodes were released through being available at the restaurants themselves. However, there was a 6th episode made, advertised, and fully produced that went undocumented for 12 years following its release. This is the legend of the monster on McDonaldland lock. This episode was believed to have been unreleased for years, as it was never available at McDonald's restaurants. The very name of this episode had been debated for a long time, as the episode has also been referred to as the Legend of McDonaldland Lock. This is due to what was one of the few pieces of documentation of the episode online, the official website for the series listing it as such. That page also had rare screenshots from the episode, showing that it was finished. There is certainly some irony that the lost episode of this show that no one could find centers on a creature that's rumored to exist but also cannot be found. Funnily enough, the site has a fun fact stating that the episode should be available sometime in 2003. Not really much of a fun fact, and yeah, it should be? What happened to it? Did they make the episode and then not distribute it, sealing its fate as forever lost media? No one knew for sure. It was speculated for years why this release was so limited. Theories popped up such as the inclusion of a racial slur in the episode, causing an immediate recall. Not sure where that rumor came from. It's pretty unlikely that Sunday over here would drop a hard one. Immediately, everyone who remembered these cartoons began searching for a copy of the legendary tape. It's likely many of you watching own some of these episodes, so when this story hit the mainstream, I'm sure tons of people began searching hoping that they owned the lost episode. I personally remember one of my babysitters had some of these. Obviously not this one, but still. To hear that any of these were lost was very surprising, given how easy it was to get the other episodes of the series. To add even more fuel to the mystery, it turns out that the 5th episode, Have Time, Will Travel, included a teaser for the episode. Unfortunately, this commercial didn't include any real animation, only screenshots. This did, however, confirm the final name of the episode. Eventually, it was discovered that, as expected, this episode was never available at McDonald's restaurants, instead being an exclusive to Klasky Csupo's online store, and was first available in January of 2003. So that's why it's so rare. It had a very limited release 2 years after the previous episode. It's doubtful there were too many hardcore fans at the time jumping on its release, so I doubt that many copies were even produced. It's a textbook example for a rare release. An online exclusive when online ordering was still in its infancy, for a show based off of McDonald's? A show made to be sold as a quick impulse buy for those wanting a cartoon to go with their Happy Meal? I doubt many parents who bought one of these tapes were searching online for more episodes, so it's likely only the most hardcore of McDonaldland fans purchased this. I do wonder how many copies of this episode were made though. The other episodes are all very common. McDonald's has so many locations, and a ton of those locations stock these tapes, which means many of these were made. It's like how most fast food toys can never become too rare, as they're always made in such high quantities. There's almost never a shortage of them, besides the odd recall. Who knows? Maybe all of the unsold copies of this were destroyed, leaving very few of them left in existence. Either that, or there's a box somewhere with tons of unsold McDonald's VHS tapes that are now worth hundreds of dollars. Someone get the Hamburglar on that. Anyway, no one had come forth with a copy of the episode online. After the website that had the tape was found, it was clear it was released. Now the mission was to find a copy. Even today, there are no archived eBay listings of the tape, and very few images of it have been posted online. Because of this, it can be hard to tell what's real and what's fake. You'd see endless listings of supposed full collections of the show, but they only ever contained the first 5 episodes. It seriously looked like not a single person purchased a copy of it off that website. These were a hit when they first came out. Surely someone had a copy, right? The curious case of this VHS was brought into mainstream lost media attention on December 20th, 2014, when a 4chan thread was created meant to discuss the rarest thing you own. The OP started the thread by detailing his copy of The Legend of McDonaldland Lock, stating that he's owned it for years, but when he and his brother went to research what a set would go for online, they couldn't find any info about this extra one. He provided photos of the VHS itself and even its cover. Though the cover seemed off, it appears to be a catch-all cover that could be used for any episode. This makes sense given the tape was an online exclusive. Maybe all of the ones ordered from the website came in this cover. Perhaps they even just made each tape when they were ordered? That could also explain its rarity. The thread quickly centered on the VHS, as many replied stating it was still lost, and the OP was correct in how rare it was. This was a huge deal. No one had ever claimed to own a copy of it before. Well, with proof, that is. They eventually provided photos of it running on a VCR, which confirmed its legitimacy. A copy was finally found. Throughout the thread, various anonymous posters offered obscene amounts of money for the tape, with some even offering a ton of money if the OP promised to never rip it. Most of these posts were likely tongue-in-cheek, but the thread didn't end with the episode being uploaded, so the wait continued. All throughout the following year, more screenshots from the episode were posted, including some clean ones that showed it had been ripped and was ready for release. On July 12, 2015, an unlisted 18-second clip of the episode was posted onto YouTube. On August 14th, 4 minutes of the episode were posted in another unlisted video on a different account. All of this led up to September 6th, when YouTube user What a Cartoon uploaded the full episode onto the site. The original upload has since been removed, but re-uploads are still online today. After 12 years, the episode had been found. So, how's the episode itself? Does it live up to its legendary status? Well, it is pretty fun, and up to the quality of the other episodes. The show, while obviously an advertisement for McDonald's, is pretty well made with good animation and writing. I'm honestly surprised this concept was never made into a full show, though I guess the in-restaurant release model was more attractive to the company. The episode centers on Simon, the titular Monstro McDonaldland Lock himself, who befriends Birdie, and they both learn important lessons like keeping secrets while not being afraid to show themselves to others. This episode is also very important, as it was the final voice acting role of Christine Cavanaugh. It was great to see her final performance finally archived online for all to see. She played the role of Birdie. Interestingly, at the end of the episode, there's another commercial promising future adventures with the McDonaldland gang. However, there was never a 7th episode made in any form, and this commercial didn't show any specifics of a new episode. The deal to make these cartoons likely only lasted 6 episodes, and this ad was likely made in hopes they'd get funding to produce more, but after the limited release of episode 6, it was clear the show was over. This case is just so interesting to me because this show was popular and it had its fans. It makes you wonder what happened behind the scenes that caused this one's odd release. It's probably something simple. Maybe the tapes were steadily declining in popularity, and they just didn't want to make a ton of copies of this one. But regardless, it's an ever-fascinating release. While the episode itself is online and preserved for all to see, it's true that original genuine tapes of the episode are still incredibly rare. If you own a copy, you're sitting on what was once a lost treasure. Who knew a McDonald's cartoon could be so interesting? This will always be one of my all-time favorite cases of lost media. As we all know, VHS used to be huge, and every new movie would get a release on it. But now that it's essentially dead in the mainstream, you gotta wonder, what was the last big release on the format? Obviously, that's a really tricky question to answer, so let's focus on just one company to make it simpler. What was the last new Disney movie released on VHS? Well, the VHS scene really started to fade off in North America at least around 2006. So as weird as it is to say, Pixar's Cars was the last big new Disney movie released on VHS. That alone is pretty surprising, but to make it even more interesting, it didn't have a standard release. The elusive Cars VHS you see here was released on February 20th, 2007, and was a Disney Movie Club exclusive. Disney Movie Club is a membership program that allows you to purchase Disney movies through a mail order service, sometimes at a discounted price. While not always worth it, the service has offered some exclusive items, such as this Cars VHS. Since the medium was pretty far along with being phased out by 2006, I guess Pixar and Disney didn't think it would be wise to produce a ton of these. As such, the VHS was made in very limited quantities and was only ever available for official purchase online. This, combined with the fact that Cars is a very popular movie, I saw it like 6 times when it was in theaters, makes for a great recipe for a very rare release. It's unknown how many copies were made, but there are certainly more people looking for this tape than the amount produced. Nowadays, this goes for quite a lot at auction, especially sealed. Naturally, sealed VHSs are worth way more than open ones, but who wouldn't crack open their special copy of Cars on VHS? Seeing these later movies officially in this format is a treat itself. For Disney movie completionists, this release must be a nightmare, but it makes for a highlight of any collection due to its unique story and humorous nature. Of course, Cars of all movies is the rarest Pixar VHS. With that said, the rate of which VHS declined in popularity differed from country and region, so the tape did have a standard release in other territories. Here's a Polish release, and here's a Japanese one. Pretty much any release of this movie in this format will go for a fair amount, but the Disney Movie Club release is the real gem. It seems like any late release VHS tape of a popular property was destined to become rare. For example, good luck finding a copy of Drake and Josh Go Hollywood on VHS for under $100. There were many iconic pieces of media that started life as direct-to-VHS, such as VeggieTales or the many Scooby-Doo specials that went straight to home video. However, the direct-to-VHS release method paved the way for many strange, bizarre releases. This is true with DVDs as well, but given the old primitive look of VHS and the technology at the time, it makes these even stranger and more off-putting, but oh so interesting. It's practically public access TV on home media. One great example of this would be, if you were on the internet in 2015, there's a good chance you remember this kid. In late 2015, clips from what appeared to be a late 80s special started spreading like wildfire online. Many of you might recognize these clips, but might not know where they're from. This is Kazoo Kid. His real name is Brett Ambler, and he's the star of a 1989 VHS tape named On Kazoo. This is its story. Clips from this video reached internet meme status around late 2015, but at that point, only a few clips of the full video had been posted online. That was until January 23, 2016, when YouTube user DeadVCR graciously uploaded the full version. On Kazoo is just under 30 minutes in length, and is pretty bizarre in both tone and content.
Did you hear that? Of course I like to play! You know what I like the most? Look! My kazoo!
It stars Brett as he gets over his fears of playing with these other kids, while also highlighting his love for the kazoo. The tape is written with viewer interaction, with Brett often asking the viewer to kazoo along with him. This has to be one of the wildest 30 minutes ever pressed onto video. While meant for kids, there are a lot of off-putting aspects, making for an incredibly bizarre but hilarious watch. One of the strangest things about this video is that you'll quickly notice that most of the kids besides Brett are dubbed over. This is especially noticeable with the girls, as a woman clearly much older than them dubs them over. And also, it's the same voice for every girl.
Aren't you?
Can we do more kazoo?
Yeah, I like to kazoo. Me too! Kazoo can do anything with a kazoo. Anything?
The music is all synth sound effects, there aren't really any sets. This was clearly a very low budget production. The video concludes with an absolutely touching endgame, where Brett sings to the audience about how they've grown so close in 21 minutes, and then he kazoos away with his friends. Now, that was just a surface overview of the actual video, but what's the context of any of this? How and why was it made? Why are there no sets? Why are the voices dubbed over? Thankfully, we have answers to almost everything, all thanks to our special friend Brett himself. That's right, after the video blew up in popularity, he came out online admitting that he was the same Brett as seen in the video. He has since given lots of great insight on the creation of not just On Kazoo, but the entire Special Friends trilogy. On Kazoo wasn't the only video starring Brett and the Special Friends gang. At the beginning of On Kazoo, you can see a copyright for a company named Lights Camera Interaction, and that company released 2 more VHS tapes following the success of On Kazoo. The first sequel, titled Let's Sing Along, was released a year later in 1990 and is about 25 minutes in length.
Do you hear what I hear? We want Brett. We want Brett. We want Brett. Well, I'll tell you a secret. Come here. I'm Brett.
This addition to the Special Friends saga once again stars Brett, though this time it's not about kazoos, instead singing songs. He does this on stage in front of a participating audience of Special Friends. This episode once again features all the oddities of the original, and is all around a pretty solid addition to the lineup. People say sequels are never quite as good as the originals, and sure, this one doesn't have as many jaw-dropping iconic moments as the original, but it's still a pretty solid watch. This one was actually uploaded onto YouTube in full before the original On Kazoo, but once both were uploaded, it seemed that marked the end of the Kazoo Kid dynasty. However, on January 27th, 2016, just a few days after DeadVCR unleashed the full rip of On Kazoo onto YouTube, the world was changed. Brett himself held a Reddit AMA. I am Brett Ambler, aka Kazoo Kid. Ask me anything. This thread changed everything. All the secrets of the Kazoo Kid lineage were revealed. How scientists thought our world worked was challenged. Reading this thread actually unlocks the percentage of your brain thought untappable. You see, along with detailing the production itself, Brett confirmed the existence of a third Special Friends VHS. This one was called Ring Along Sing Along, and was completely unheard of until mentioned here. This tape was mentioned while Brett was describing the physical releases of the episodes. Each VHS came bundled with a pretend musical instrument like the one seen in the videos. On Kazoo came with a kazoo, Let's Sing Along came with a microphone, and Ring Along Sing Along came with jingle bells. Curiously, Brett claimed he didn't recall much from this one, but eerily stated it's out there, confirming it was released. Before we talk about this final chapter though, one of the greatest revelations that came from this thread, to me at least, has to be info on who actually orchestrated these projects. Their names are seen in the credits, but I never put it together. Now, you may not recognize these names, but have you ever heard of the toy company Melissa and Doug? In a crazy twist of fate, the people who made these puppets and run this legendary toy company are actually the same people responsible for On Kazoo. It makes a lot of sense. Each tape came bundled with a toy instrument, and the specials were made to help get kids involved, and served as good videos for kids to watch during the developmental stages of their life, which all lines up with what the company does today. Also in the thread, Brett was questioned as to why so many of the kids were dubbed over. He explains, it was a budget movie, and Melissa was who we had around, so all of the male dubs were done by me, and all of the female dubs were done by Melissa. That also makes a lot of sense. It was filmed on a low budget with no actual sets, so the raw audio probably didn't sound that good with all the outdoor noise. They had to redub it, but not all of the kids would be available for that, so they just had Brett and Melissa do all of it. Yeah, I wasn't just joking around. This thread is actually really interesting and gives serious insight into how these were put together. One thing I still want to know though is how these were sold. They came bundled with toys, so they were more than just your standard VHS. Since they're made by Melissa and Doug, maybe they were for sale at toy stores? Or maybe even grocery stores? Somewhere a parent could see these and think, yeah, that's a good looking video for my kid. Maybe they were also a mail order thing though, we don't know. Speaking of which, this is the original VHS case of On Kazoo, featuring really well-lit images of the kids, advertising it as a play-along filled with fun and friends. On the back, there are lots of accolades for the tape, all genuine I'm sure, but at the bottom, you can see what was the address of Lights Camera Interaction Inc. As it turns out, Melissa and Doug was founded in 1988 as Lights Camera Interaction Inc., and this is how they got their start. I still can't believe On Kazoo is actually connected to such a prolific toy company. That's so fascinating to me. Nowadays, the Special Friends VHS tapes are very hard to find. As Melissa and Doug was still a startup when these were released, they probably couldn't fund producing a ton of them. Finding one with the instrument or even still in the original shrink wrap would be insane. As for that third tape, Ring Along Sing Along, it was released in 1991 and concludes the trilogy. Brett doesn't have a copy of this one, and it was completely lost media until February 25th, 2018, when a YouTube account called Special Friend uploaded it in full.
I wonder where the kids are. I was supposed to meet them here, on the ramp. We were gonna play together. All kinds of games. I wonder where Brett is. He was supposed to meet us here.
As it turns out, this was uploaded by Emily Shornick, who actually plays one of the girls in the episode. She was sent a digital rip of the episode on Facebook by an anonymous fan, who I guess had a copy of it and felt the best way to get it out there was to contact those who were in it. Unfortunately, the upload is not in the proper aspect ratio, so some things get cut off, but still, it was finally available, and as expected, it's incredible. And as the final hurrah of the Special Friends, it was certainly a banger of a conclusion. Adding to the lore, to promote the series, various promotional videos advertising the tapes were made, showcasing the physical tapes of the specials. Curiously, some copies of On Kazoo have a slightly different box. The one seen here has no Special Friends logo. Perhaps this is the original release from before Special Friends was made into a series? As for Brett himself, he's actually still acting and is also a musician, so if you were worried about the Kazoo Kid, he's thankfully doing well. This has probably been way more info than anyone would ever want to know about the Special Friends series or On Kazoo, but weird releases like these are what made the VHS era so memorable. And there you have it, a look at some of the wackiest VHS tapes ever released. As interesting as these are, I've only covered a handful of the great stories from the world of VHS tapes. Did you know the first piece of South Park animation became popular by being spread around on bootleg tapes? How about those styrofoam tapes you could only play once? And don't even get me started talking about the history of anime on VHS. VHS may be an outdated medium, but it'll always live on through its fans, and with the many oddities you just can't get on other formats. I'm sure there are at least a handful of families who still rely on their trusty VCR, and hey, check out all the cool content you can watch. Those using DVDs or dare I even say Blu-rays will never be able to experience the legend of McDonald's Land Lock, and Amazon Prime Video sure doesn't have On Kazoo. One of the best things about these tapes though, was how easy it was to produce them, even homemade ones. VCRs had a feature where you could record whatever you were watching onto a tape. This is actually why so many things like TV bumpers are preserved. You'd be recording the episodes and would just so happen to catch something that would have become lost. It was like the Wild West of video formats, but it's what gave us the freedom to preserve so much. And also, it means if you get a used VHS, you generally never know what's really on there. Most of them are pretty normal, but you might find yourself watching an episode of Cat Dog when suddenly it switches over to something the previous owner recorded. Many people have full collections of recorded content on VHS tapes. I know I have one that has like 3 minutes of Sonic 3 gameplay, but then cuts to the ending half of a Drake and Josh episode. You can't get stuff like that anywhere else besides VHS, and because of that, I think they'll always have charm and worth. While it's certainly a medium far past its prime, there will always be cool and crazy stories to be told about these clunky, outdated, lovable forms of media.